The Atlanta Braves have made a trade acquiring Dane Dunning from the Texas Rangers. We'll break down what he does and why they got him, as well as talk about the first half MVPs and take your questions live. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Friday, July 18th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. Very excited to come back after a couple of days off. Really kind of needed the break there. And I'm ready to talk about the second half. I surprisingly missed baseball over that short break. All-Star game notwithstanding, the homer off at the end was an interesting new way to settle the All-Star game. But I want to talk about what Atlanta's rotation is going to look like. I want to talk about some of the draft signings that we've gotten so far. I want to talk about the MVPs from the first half. Before we do all of that, we've got to talk about Dane Dunning and Atlanta's acquisition of him. And reminder, this is a live show. We are live on YouTube right now, so drop your questions into the chat down here. Shout out to Emmanuel, everyday listener, asking where the tan is. Listen, I have a whole family full of fair weather people. My wife uses SPF 100, so this is about as tan as I'm going to get. But the Atlanta Braves made a trade last night. Jose Ruiz, the reliever that they DFA'd, and cash considerations to the Rangers for Dane Dunning. On the Brave side of this real quick, cash considerations is limited. It's between $50,000 and $100,000. Like the limit's $100,000. And if you claim a guy off of or if a player gets claimed off of waivers after you DFA him, you get $50,000. So these deals are typically somewhere between $55,000 and $100,000. When they say cash considerations, when they say a player was traded for some return and cash, that can be paying his salary. When they say cash considerations, it's somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. So Atlanta gave a reliever that they DFA'd, or we're going to DFA or whatever, and cash considerations to get Dane Dunning. And he's not been great this year. Okay. He's not been bad. He's not been great. 10 2/3 innings, 4 runs on 9 hits with 5 walks and 10 strikeouts for the Rangers, working in a relief role. One of those walks was intentional. So 4 walks across 10 2/3 innings. But he's not going to be starting this weekend. He's not ready to be a starter, but he has been a starter. To Mark's point in the chat here, he has been a starter in his career. He has 129 career appearances in the majors. 102 of them are starts. He started 11 of 12 appearances in AAA Round Rock this year for Texas, 4.47 ERA. In his career, he has a 4.34 ERA in the majors. So, again, he's not a frontline guy. He's not going to come out here and just kill you on strikeouts and all of that. But when you look at in his roles as a starter, he's had a 4.27 ERA in his career. He struck out, 485 batters in 520 innings. So he's not been great, but he's not been terrible. He's a number 5 starter. Is what he likely is. My expectation for this weekend is they're probably going to continue to use him in relief and slowly stretch him out as things are going, right? So he'll pitch a couple innings. My guess is on Saturday behind Joey Wentz. We'll break that down in just a second. But I kind of want to talk about what Dane Dunning does, because this is a profile that I think Atlanta can do some work with. And there is a lot of similarities here to Joey Wentz, because Dane Dunning's number 1 pitch that he throws is a cutter. He throws two different fastballs. People who watch this show all the time, people who read my work over on Braves Today, know I am a big fan of multiple fastballs. And I think just about everybody should throw a cutter. Cutter is an amazing bridge pitch that does a lot of different stuff for you. But he throws a cutter. It's about 89 or so. He's got a sinker right about 90 miles an hour. He's not a ton of velocity here. Change up at 85 miles an hour, a slider at 80, and a curve at 75. And again, really small sample size. He hasn't allowed a lot of hard hit balls this year. He hasn't given up really hard contact. He does have an additional year of team control and an option. So he will be around if they tender him. He will be around for 2026. I think what this is the type of trade that I wanted. Not as impactful as I wanted, but this is a trade to acquire a guy who can help down the stretch, but is also under control for next year. And I think there's a little bit of tweaks you can do. His cutter locations, I don't quite think are maybe the best. I don't think he's using the slider enough. The curveball is more of a knuckle curve. He's really ramped up the cutter usage this year. This is the first year of his career the cutter's been his primary pitch. But something where, he's all but stopped throwing the four-seamer. He's thrown in his career, he's thrown 9 different pitches. He's cutting them back. He's cutting back how many he throws to just these 5. And really, it's been predominantly cutter. But I do think this is a scenario where he uses the slider a ton against righties. The changeup's the lefty pitch, so is the knuckle curve. But I do think you can see Atlanta kind of play around with this mix a little bit and figure out how can we optimize him for having a shot at the back end of our rotation next year. Aaron in the chat, I like Dunning for the Braves, but I also don't know what the Rangers see in Jose Ruiz. I really don't either. This was a weird trade from their perspective. I don't really know why they did this unless they just decided they didn't want him anymore. It doesn't make a lot of sense from the Rangers' perspective. I would have rather had Dane Dunning than Jose Ruiz. The only thing that I can really think of why they would prefer Jose Ruiz over Dane Dunning is if they just wanted a little bit better stuff in the pen, right? Ruiz is throwing 95, Dunning's throwing 90, 89. So the only thing I can think of is maybe they just wanted some better stuff in the pen. But I like this move because you have additional control, because he's optionable. The big issue for Atlanta's bullpen, and Dylan Dodd's dealing with this right now, you didn't have any flexibility in your pen. You didn't have the ability to option a lot of these guys down. And so it was a lot of you're not going to DFA or option down Dylan Lee. You had to send Dazabel down. You had to send Dylan Dodd down. And right now, the only person in your pen with an option is Dunning, Wander Suero, and Dylan Lee. So I like the fact that we had this option. Kevin in the chat points out that Reese is going to shut us down next weekend when we play the Rangers. Revenge games are real. People who watch this show know I am a believer in revenge games being real. But I do also, while I'm in here too, again, the whole reason that this move, that I like this move, is you need innings this year, but also he has control next season. If he was a rental only, as much as I, didn't care for Jose Ruiz, I would have been a little bit annoyed had they made this deal for just this year. But the fact he has control for next year, if you have a lot of rotation options, you feel like you don't need them, maybe you can flip them to somebody for something in spring training. But the fact he has control for next year is good. I also like the fact that Atlanta put Joey Wentz in the rotation. He's going to start on Saturday. I think my expectation would be Atlanta probably follows Joey Wentz with Dane Dunning. That's what I would do. They're both cutter guys. They use their cutters differently. Dane Dunning, again, it's his primary fastball, but he really does two separate things. Question in the chat from Patrick. So one option, if it's used, he will have no options next year. His option's already been used this year. Whether or not Atlanta sends him down doesn't matter since Texas optioned him. his option year has already started for this year. So Atlanta might as well option him back and forth because either way, the option's already gone. Dane Dunning uses the cutter, primary fastball, and he plays the slider and the curveball off of it. And that's a handedness thing. Sliders to one-handed batter, curveballs to the other. But everything he does is vertical with the cutter, the slider, and the curveball, or sinker and changeup playing those off of it. The cutter's kind of the basis for everything. The slider, obviously, the slider ends up working as the bridge pitch between the cutter and the curveball. This is something new that a lot of pitchers who have gone to the cutter have started to do, is to, rather than using the cutter as a bridge pitch between your primary four-seam fastball and a slider, they use the cutter as a primary pitch and use the slider as the bridge. I kind of like that. But anyway, I got distracted. Sorry. Back to Joey Wentz. He uses his cutter, but in a different way. Joey Wentz's cutter is really two different pitches. He has a more traditional type of cutter that doesn't have a lot of horizontal movement, doesn't have a lot of break, like vertical, horizontal, it's just barely off of neutral. And then he has one that moves more laterally, drops a little more, that's like a baby slider. So these guys do similar things, but they do it in different ways. And Joey Wentz does use the cutter between a four-seamer and his curveball. Whereas, again, Dane Dunning uses the cutter as his primary pitch, and the slider's the bridge between the cutter and the curveball. So I do think piggybacking them lefty to a righty on Saturday would be a really fun idea. You would get to see a bunch of different ways that cutter gets used. And honestly, I am incredibly impressed with what Joey Wentz has been able to do with his cutter. He can get ground balls with it. He can get chase with it. He can get soft contact with it. He can use it to set up other pitches. Incredibly exciting. And I think both of these guys in the end, and Sam points this out in the chat, and this is where I was going with this before we go to break. I think both of these guys, the biggest advantage to these guys this year is it means you don't have to run too many innings through Grant Holmes and Spencer Strider. Spencer Strider is coming back from elbow surgery, missed a full season, obviously, and Grant Holmes is converting to the rotation after being a reliever. Holmes is probably capped at about 150 innings. I don't know what Strider's going to be capped at. Obviously, he missed some more time, but I still probably wouldn't want to push him too much past 100 or so. So having these two guys down the stretch, having a Bryce Elder, guys like that, mean you have bodies to take innings so that you don't have to push those guys too hard down the stretch in a season that is pretty likely not going to result in the postseason. In just a second, though, I do want to talk about MVPs from the first half before we get to the future rotation. There's a question here from Adam in the chat about Hurston Waldrop. He's coming. So wait a second here. But I want to talk about the MVPs from the first half. I think we're probably all on the same page on this, but we'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsey Crosby. Let's talk about the MVPs from the first half. And you can leave your ideas in the chat, but I absolutely do think that Grant Holmes is one of your two MVPs from the first half. He's definitely been, I think, a pleasant surprise for me from the perspective of we have not seen a relief to starting conversion, knock on wood, go this well in a while. Yes, you had a very good ERA last year from Reynaldo Lopez, a 1.99. But he also went on the injured list 3 times in the second half of the year and has been unavailable almost this entire year. A lot of the reliever to starter conversions end up not working out. AJ Puck did not work out for the Marlins. He got traded. We've seen guys all across the league not really work out. We've seen a lot of them fade in the second half. And Grant Holmes still could fade in the second half. But A 3.77 ERA with 119 strikeouts and 105 innings has been very, very good. Now, the walks aren't great. He leads the National League among qualified starters in walks with the 50. Not great, mind you, but still a situation where he's been a lot better than I think than we expected. And some of Grant Holmes's walks, from my amateur pitching analyst kind of hat here, almost look like he's trying to avoid throwing like he would rather walk a guy than give up an extra base hit. I don't think that's always the case, but I think some of these situations he's trying to pitch around somebody and he's willing to walk them versus, coming into the zone with a hittable pitch on 3-2 to keep the runner off base. Blake Snell's big into this approach too, although Blake Snell does have a little bit better swing and miss stuff, I think, than Grant's had. But Grant Holmes, a guy that I want to point out, he's making virtually nothing. It's a second year. I believe his deal is $740,000, $750,000 maybe. He's not arbitration eligible till 2028, and he's not a free agent until 2031. I saw somebody discussing maybe trading Grant Holmes this offseason. And to me, that would be a terrible idea, because the hardest thing to find in Major League Baseball, outside of a very good offensive shortstop who can still play decent defense, has been innings. Reliable, good innings out of your rotation. Now, do I think Grant Holmes is a number 2 starter? No. But he's got a 3.77 ERA in his first season starting in the majors. And so this is a situation where it would be incredibly dumb to trade Grant Holmes. Yes, he does have value to other teams. They would give you something decent for him, but he has fantastic value to Atlanta because not only is he giving you innings, he's giving you quality innings for very, very cheap. And if there's anything I've noticed about this front office, specifically when it comes to pitching, they are looking for value, right? Sometimes it's value in the acquisition cost. Think about Pierce Johnson. They traded for Pierce Johnson from Colorado, where he was terrible in the pen. Some of that was Colorado, right? Colorado's been bad, and he didn't pitch well at altitude. But a lot of that was a suboptimal pitch mix. And so they did not give up anything real significant to get him. And then they promptly turned around and they've gotten great value out of him. They re-signed him to a deal. So the acquisition cost was lower. But then the other side of this is the payroll cost of signing a guy or acquiring a guy to start for them. Chris Sale. You gave up Vaughn Grissom. You got Chris Sale and his entire 2024 salary from the Red Sox for Vaughn Grissom. They did not pay him a penny last year. The Red Sox paid it. They signed him to an extension, all that good stuff. Like Ronaldo Lopez, they paid him like a number 5 starter. And before the injuries, it looked like they were going to get fantastic value. Grant Holmes is in that similar bucket. Atlanta's trying to get better performance than what they're spending for that performance. Because when you are a team that has a financial, I'm going to say cap, right? It is very obvious to all of us that Atlanta was intent on staying below the luxury tax. And this is absolutely the number one reason why you can still put up a competitive team when you do that is finding guys like Grant Holmes who are making virtually nothing. Spencer Schwellenbach last year making virtually nothing, and instead giving you fantastic contributions. This helps offset a $22 million salary for a Chris Sale, for a Spencer Strider, for an Austin Riley who's not hitting at the moment. We'll get to that in a minute. So they're absolutely not going to trade Grant Holmes. And there's a thing here in the chat from Braves Thrills. I would trade Chris Sale before I would trade Grant Holmes. If I didn't think Atlanta was going to try to compete next year, I'd also advocate to move Chris Sale, but I think they're going to keep him. They're going to keep probably anybody that has additional team control outside of this year, with the exception of if they get a great offer for like an Aaron Bummer or a Pierce Johnson or something, right? Marcell Ozuna, probably gone. Raisel Iglesias, more than like almost certainly gone. But I don't see them trading anybody else who has future control, simply because they intend to be back in the competition picture next year. They intend to be back to the Atlanta Braves, who are not the favorites to win the division and win the World Series because of this bad year, but in the mix, right? And honestly, Grant Holmes is the type of personality, and Emmanuel just put this in the chat. Grant Holmes is the type of personality you want on your team. Think about last year on the final day of the season. He found out he was going to start 30 minutes before the game when they scratched Chris Sale after he pitched an inning and a third the day before. And he went out there and took the ball and pitched as long as he could. I think he went like 4 1/3 innings or something like that on 30 minutes notice. 4 innings. There we go. 4 innings, 1 hit, no runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts on 30 minutes notice when he pitched the day before for an inning and 2/3. That's a dog, and that's a dude you want on your ball club. They're not going to trade him. Now, if they trade Marcell Ozuna, I think that would be a good thing, because my offensive MVP is Drake Baldwin. And I kind of feel like I'm a broken record with a lot of the other podcasts right now. Jake Mastriani and I were talking about this last week. I think when he did his show, he also talked about his MVPs were Drake Baldwin and Grant Holmes. He interviewed CJ Nikowski on the show that he dropped today, and CJ said Drake Baldwin and Grant Holmes. But for Drake Baldwin to debut in the majors this year and not only be one of the best hitters on the team, but to be one of the best rookies in the entire sport is a really big deal. If you look at, for all rookies, Drake Baldwin has the 4th highest batting average at 279. If you sort this by OPS, he is 3rd with an 830. The first 2 guys are athletics. I mean, so many of these things. I think he's 3rd in homers with 11, despite only having 190 at-bats. So he's been one of the best rookies in all of baseball. And I wrote about this, I think it was last week, whenever I pulled the plug and said the Braves are done, and said, hey, they need to play Drake Baldwin as much as possible so he can win Rookie of the Year. MLB.com, they did an informal poll of their writers, and they all said Jacob Mizorowski is the Rookie of the Year as of right now in the National League. I will lead an angry mob to New York City to storm their offices if they actually give him that award. Drake Baldwin should be the Rookie of the Year, and Atlanta just needs to continue playing him as much as possible, letting him produce so they get that first-round pick, because the Braves are on track to have the 4th best odds of the number 1 overall pitch and the number 1 overall pick. And so adding a pick after the first round, you already have a huge bonus pool. That would give you even more of a large bonus pool. Atlanta needs to get that from Drake Baldwin. All right, in just a second, let's talk about the rotation. There's a couple questions about some prospects in here. That's where I'm going with this. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Last planned segment before we get to your questions. I've been starring all the questions here in the chat here on YouTube. Do me a favor, and if you have any questions you want me to get to in the next segment, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I've got about 7 or 8 right now, but we'll get to the rest of those in just a few minutes. The rotation as of now, this weekend, you have Spencer Strider tonight versus the Yankees. You have Joey Wentz tomorrow. Again, I would probably throw Dane Dunning back-to-back with Joey Wentz. We'll see what they do. Dunning did report today, so he should be in uniform and in the dugout and ready to go, although I don't know if they use him on his first day here. And then you have Grant Holmes on Sunday versus the Yankees. I do think there's a couple prospects that you're going to see. And I think you're going to see these prospects. To answer a question in the chat early from Sam, do we rush Swelly back? I don't think Atlanta does. I don't think they rush Spencer Schwellenbach back. It wouldn't be second half of September anyway. I don't think they rush Chris Sale back. And so right now, your rotation, Spencer Strider, Grant Holmes, Bryce Elder, and then for now, Joey Wentz is your 4, and you don't know who the 5 is. I guess it'd be technically Davis Daniel right now. He is still up. So Bryce Elder and Davis Daniel are your 4 and 5. They would line up if they followed the same pattern they followed last week. I think Daniel would start on next Monday versus the Giants, and Elder would start on Tuesday. So I think you're going to see some of these prospects come up. I wrote about this morning over at bravestoday.com. Again, go subscribe. It's in your inbox every single morning. We also do game recaps there, by the way. Shout out to Emmanuel being a paid subscriber to the newsletter. But J.R. Ritchie is one of the guys who I think you're going to see out of Gwinnett in the majors. We saw him start the Futures game last weekend, pitched a single inning. He's gone 5-4 with a 2.46 ERA, 79 strikeouts in 8 in the third innings, 27 walks, 7 homers allowed. What I like about Ritchie, you saw this in the Futures game. He's what I call that kitchen sink approach, right? He throws both a four-seamer and a sinker. He averaged a 96 on that four-seamer in the Futures game. I don't think he's going to necessarily hold that velocity all the way through a start. That was a 1-inning outing, but it's still a mid-90s velocity on the fastball. He has a changeup, a curveball, and a sweeper. He makes his first start in Gwinnett. I believe it's tomorrow. He's on the slate for, I think it's Saturday. Maybe it's Saturday. Blake Burkhalter's on Sunday. I think there's a little bit they're going to look for before they consider bringing him to Atlanta. Lefties, Richie's given up, I think it's 7 home runs all year. All 7 of those homers have been given up to lefties. They've hit 182 with a 357 slug, which isn't, amazing by any stretch. But righties are hitting 158 with a 195 slug. So lefties are still a little bit of a problem for J.R. Ritchie. And if you think about the fact his best pitch is his changeup. So changeup and a sweeper are kind of 2 of his main pitches. He's got the curveball and the 2 fastballs. I can see if your changeup and your sweeper are your best pitches, I could see a little bit of platoon issues there. And it makes sense that they probably would want to work with him a little bit on taking care of that. So definitely, let's see what he can do against lefties. I'm assuming if we see Ritchie in the majors, it wouldn't be until August. It might be later in August, mid-August or something, but I do think you will see Ritchie this year. Sam in the chat says, please bring the prospects up. I agree. Please bring the prospects up. But I don't want a situation where Dieter Fuentes, again, he was rushed, right? That was incredibly fast to get him up, and he wasn't ready. And the hardest thing about these guys, these prospects, when you call them up, you have to put them on the 40-man roster, which means you typically have to lose somebody. There's nobody else you can shift to the 60-day IL but Austin Riley. And so you have to DFA somebody to get these prospects up. So that's, I think, it's going to hold off on Ritchie. They're going to wait to see what they have in some of the other guys first before they do that with Ritchie. Now, a guy already on the 40-man that I think you'll see is Hurston Waldrop. He had a terrible start in, I want to say it was in May, I think. His first 6 starts of the year for Gwinnett, 7.04 ERA. Okay. And his last one was 3 runs on 2 hits and 3 walks in 2/3 of an inning. Didn't finish the inning. And since then, he changed his mechanics. I talked about that on a show right after it happened. And since then, he's made 11 starts with a 4.13 ERA, 28 walks to 58 strikeouts. He's been much better. That 7.04 ERA stretch, 18 walks to 21 strikeouts. And In 10 of those 11 outings, he's finished at least the 5th inning. He's pitched into the 6th inning on 8 of those starts. And in 10 of the 11, he had more strikeouts than walks. So he's been much better, and he's already on the 40-man roster. Like, I genuinely, I think he's penciled in for tonight's start. You may see him as early as next week. It's probably going to be the beginning of August, but I do think Hurston Waldrop's going to be a guy who's going to come up and going to make starts for the Braves, because you need to see, is he an option for you in the rotation next year or not? Because think about, Atlanta's used between 10 and 13 standard starters every year from 21 through 24. On a newsletter a couple of weeks ago, I actually broke down the entire list, but between 10 and 13 regular starters, they like to come into spring training with 7 guys stretched out and ready to go. As of right now, those 7 guys would be Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Spencer Strider, Ronaldo Lopez, Grant Holmes, Bryce Elder, and who is the 7th? Maybe it's Davis Daniel, maybe it's Dane Dunning, but you can see where we're having trouble even figuring out the 7, never mind getting to 10 or 13. So I absolutely do think that they need to see what they have with Hurston Waldrop. He's throwing more sliders than fastballs in Gwinnett. Some of that is just the Braves are trying to get him to work on that slider to make it better. But I do want to see him up and make some starts soon. And then the third guy, and I talked about him a ton at this point, Blake Burkhalter. I wrote a newsletter last week saying promote him to Gwinnett, and then hours later, they promoted him to Gwinnett. We absolutely, he's got to get better against lefties. It's something where lefties are hitting 264 off of him. Their OPS is over 100 points worse. But I do think that as a guy that is Rule 5 eligible this winter, they are going to need to get him to the majors to get as much information on him as possible. If I'm putting these guys in the order of how soon you see them in the majors, Hurston Waldrop's probably number 1, Blake Burkhalter's number 2, and J.R. Ritchie's number 3, simply because Waldrop's already on the 40-man. Blake's going to have to go in the 40-man this winter, and Ritchie has a little bit more time. So that is kind of where I think we are on this. All right. In just a second, let's get to your questions. I've got 13 starred right now. If you have one, drop it in the chat, and I'll grab it as we get to this. But we'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. My favorite show of the week. We do the live show. We take your questions and everything here in the chat. I'm going to start at the very top early in the show here. Adam asks, is there not a world where we would trade Iggy, Pierce Johnson, Enyel De Los Santos, and Rafael Montero, and the bullpen still be good? I think if you see anybody that has additional control moved, I think you're right. It would be a Pierce Johnson, an Enyel De Los Santos, Rafael Montero's expiring contract. I forgot about that. But you do have relief options. Giancarlo Lara has been one of the more impressive relievers from a stuff perspective. Hayden Harris has absolutely had the results in Gwinnett. I still don't understand how he does it. I think it's the extension and everything and the deception, and we can't really measure deception that well. But people just don't necessarily people don't really pick up his pitches that well. So I do think you have a group of 3 or 4 guys you can call up from the minors and stick in your pen. We've already seen them start to do some of that. Wander Suero came up. He does have an option left if I have this right. But they've already got Wander Suero up. You have guys you can call up. And so if they go past team control guys, Pierce Johnson could go, Enyel De Los Santos could go. I still think Aaron Bummer could go, simply because his contract next year jumps to $9.5 million, and they may just want to get out from under that money. So if they do that, you've got quite a few guys in Gwinnett that you can call up and stick in your pen. Again, another informational situation. We got to find out what we have in all of these guys. Super Null VA, I assume that's Virginia here. Would you offer Kansas City Drake Baldwin and Matt Olson for Bobby Witt Jr. Shortstop would be set for 10 years. They would hang the phone up on you. To get Bobby Witt Jr. from the Royals, going off of how much they like him, you would have to offer Ronald Acuna Jr. We're not going to do that, right? It's just, they don't have a need for Drake Baldwin with having multiple really good catchers and a farm system full of catchers. They have too many options at first base now between Jack Caglione, Vinny Pasquantino. They're playing Salvador Perez some at first base to save his legs. They don't have a use for Matt Olson. They'd find a way to put him in there, right? Drake Baldwin, they're stacked at that position as well, and they're not going to trade Bobby Witt Jr. That's their MVP. He was runner-up last year. They're absolutely not going to make that trade. It would be cool. I would love something like that, but they're just not going to do it. Okay, Adam asked about Herschel Waldrop. We kind of already answered that. I didn't even realize there, but he is much improved. I do think that the Braves need to get him out there. From Braves Thrills, is this trade deadline an opportunity to reset the tax? And if so, what would the offseason look like with a reset tax? I think because Atlanta saved money on the Jurickson Profar suspension, it would be very hard to go over the tax simply because when you acquire a player at the deadline, you only get what's remaining on their contract. So unless you're taking somebody who is, making $30 million a year, you're not going to take on enough salary to push yourself over the tax at that point in the season. And Atlanta's not going to do that anyway without getting some sort of salary offset, like the Jorge Soler trade last year. It was Jorge Soler and Luke Jackson for Tyler Matzik and a prospect, and that was to make the money work between Matzik and Jackson. So I don't think you're going to go over the tax at the trade deadline. The offseason with the reset tax, I've touched on this a little bit, I think in a written newsletter earlier in the year when it looked like they were trying to reset the tax. But I think you have options. There are a lot of frontline starting pitchers that are going to be available. And some of them have had bad years, right? Michael King's been hurt. Zach Gallen's underperformed. But you have a lot of Dylan Cease hasn't been great, but you have a lot of big name prominent pitchers who are available. I still don't know if the Braves are willing to sign a pitcher to a big deal. Reportedly, the Jeff Hoffman contract, that would have been the longest free agent contract for a pitcher that Alex Anthopoulos has ever given out. The rumor was a 5-year deal there. Aaron Nola, same thing. When they tried to get him, that would have been the biggest free agent contract AA had given to a pitcher. But I do think you have the funds to make a run at a big name guy because the qualifying offer penalty is not nearly as severe when you did not go over the CBT. And so not a conspiracy theorist, a person who was giving Atlanta the benefit of the doubt here, you could make an argument that they said, if we're going to go add an impact arm in free agency, that's the offseason to do it. So we need to reset the tax the year before so that the qualifying offer penalty is not nearly as severe as it is if we were still over the CBT and where we were in the CBT. So I need to do something a little bit later down the line about here are the options in free agency if we want to do this, but I do think there is a connection there between all of the big name. I don't think they're going to go after a guy like a Cal Tucker, but I do think there's something there between all of those fantastic pitchers and resetting the CBT. I do think there's a connection there. The question is, does Atlanta win the free agency lottery for any of those guys? Emmanuel, 2 questions that could change things for this offense. Does Michael Harris have another second half breakout in him? Can Ozzie change the pop-ups for line drives? His power was apparently all on the wrists. There are some people that I've talked to that think a lot of Ozzie's issues are coming back to the broken wrist from last year. Now, I will say I'm a little questioning that because it doesn't seem like there's a difference lefty versus righty, whether it's his top hand or his bottom hand, right? But there are people that I've talked to who said that they expect Ozzie of next year to be closer to the historic classic Ozzie than what we're seeing now. I don't know if that's going to happen, But I do think if you see Atlanta re-sign Ozzy Albies, that'll be one of the things that we hear, as we hear that, hey, we think he was still dealing with the aftermath of the wrist injury and how hard it was to come back from the broken wrist and still have the same amount of power. So just kind of heads up on that. If it happens, I think that's happening. Michael Harris has started to change his approach back to the old Michael Harris approach. Because even this year, when Michael swung in the strike zone, he's batting almost 300. The issue is he just chases way too much, and he's taking way too many pitches in the zone. He's still chasing a lot. I don't know if he's ever going to fix that. But he is being more aggressive at swinging at pitches in the strike zone in the last couple weeks than he was early in the year. So if one of those two guys can fix their production in the back half of the schedule, and Michael Harris is my choice if you're going to have to pick one of those, it would go a long way towards helping this team have faith in 2026. Question here. Aaron made an observation. Might be a hot take, but the A's might be a playoff team in 5 years. I think they could be a playoff team sooner than that. They can figure out the pitching situation. They can be a playoff team sooner than 5 years from now. That young core is incredibly exciting. Nick Kurtz, Lawrence Butler, Jacob Wilson, Tyler Soderstrom. Like, it's a really exciting young offense. Zach Gallup's been hurt, but second base, Shea Langolier's behind the plate. Denzel Clark can't hit that well, but he's a great defender in center. Like, we're dealing with that right now. It's a very exciting roster. I think if they could find some pitching, they could do it sooner than 5 years. Question's going to be, can they find the pitching to overcome that minor league ballpark and find pitchers who actually like pitching there? Shout out to Luis Severino for taking the money and then complaining about the conditions. Like, buddy, you knew what you were going to be pitching in when you took that money, but that's fine. Larry, a trade for Ozzy would be good for Ozzy. A fresh start might do him good. I still think he can play. I go back and forth between thinking Ozzy can rebound and thinking that he might be cooked. I understand the idea of trading Ozzy. I do think that the contract is so cheap to get out of. The buyout's $4 million next year. The option's $7 million. So you save $3 million if you don't bring him back next year. The contract's so cheap. Like, the difference there is so cheap that I don't see the harm in keeping him and seeing if he can figure it out. And if he can't, you could always just move on during the season if you wanted, versus trading him. And if he does figure it out somewhere else, now they have him for 2 years at $7 million a piece. You look like an idiot. You're trading at the bottom of his value. I don't necessarily think Atlanta's going to end up doing that. But we'll see what happens. And another question there from Braves Thrills: what if Ozzy's been playing through injury? I don't know if it's a standard injury or if it's just the wrist thing, but I do think that could be part of it. And again, people I've talked to, who I'm not allowed to say their names, this wasn't on the record or anything, but they have said, like, they and people around the league believe that this could just be because of the wrist injury, lingering effects from it, messing with his off season, and just a little bit of lingering weakness or discomfort and things like that. Question here from Ian: is there any scenario in which Tim Hires is in the dugout in 26? There absolutely is. The hard thing is going to be, you're going to have turnover at the very top, right? You are going to have Brian Sittker retire. I think we all kind of know this is his final season in the dugout. And the question is going to be, how much continuity does the new manager want? It is possible that they keep a lot of the assistants. It is possible that Rick Kranitz is the only one that sticks around and everybody else leaves. So there is a chance. I don't feel like it's going to be a lot, though. I really don't think it's going to be a ton. That's just something where, I mean, why, given the underperformance the Braves have had this year, if you were a new manager coming in, what would be the argument to keep Tim Hires? Is it, we need to keep the continuity of this offensive strategy because it didn't work this year? Would it be, we need to keep the continuity of the voices in the coaching staff because he was new this year, right? There's just very little reason to keep him around But maybe the new manager does want that continuity. Maybe the new manager is an internal hire. Maybe Walt Weiss takes the job. And so in that case, he does keep Rick Kranitz. He does keep Tim Hires. He does keep some of these guys who have been here, and he just supplements with his own guys around it. Who knows? Aaron asks, for 2026, how much do we need to change? We're the best hypothetical team in the league. Is it something big or something small that needs to change? I think this is probably, as far as adding players, it's probably small. I do think you need to add to the bullpen. I do think you probably need to go out and find a veteran starter, preferably somebody who's, who you would not be worried to pop into the bullpen as long relief if you need to. But the big change that needs to come is internal, right? You need to get Austin Riley back going. You need to get Michael Harris back going. You need to get Ozzie Albies back going. Maybe they decide to change personnel at second base and put somebody else in there. Maybe Harris looks terrible down the stretch and they decide to move on and find a different option for center field. But I don't think you see a huge amount of turnover, especially in the position player group. I really think you probably see 7 starters return next year. Maybe there's a change at second base. Maybe there's a change in center field, but probably at least 7, if not 8 position players are back for next year. And then it's pitching staff wise, a veteran in the rotation. I still kind of think they probably should have traded for Soroka or Charlie Morton or somebody already by now, but I guess those teams didn't want to move those guys yet. And I do think the bullpens where you see them add some pieces, depending on how the youngsters do down the stretch. Speaking of trades and things like that, from Ellie Maynard, if we do make a trade, is it for help now or prospects for later? I do think it's somebody who can help this version of the roster, provided they have multiple years of control. All right. Dane Dunning's a great example. He's under team control next year as well. So yes, he gives you innings now, but he also gives you control next year and more options. If they trade for just a rental, I'm going to be a little annoyed about that. JD Snowden, do you see the Braves grabbing Ronald Acuna Jr.'s little brother as a shortstop option? I don't really see the Mets being willing to deal him to a division rival. Now, the Mets do have too many young infielders, right? They have Brett Beatty, they have Mark Vientos, they have Luis Angel Acuna, and obviously shortstop is already locked up for them with Francisco Lindor. Now, can they work it out? They absolutely can. They can let Pete Alonso walk, move Vientos to first, put Beatty back at third, and have Acuna as a second base option when McNeil's not playing there. Like, they can make it work. They don't have to move anybody. But they also have other guys coming too, like Jet Williams, who's a second baseman and a center fielder. If he were to be made available and they did not have restrictions on where he goes, I think the Braves could try to make a deal for him simply as a, hey, Ronald, you should take a discount to stay here kind of thing. Same thing if Maikel Garcia ever got moved by the Royals. That's Ronald's cousin. I could see the Braves trying to add Maikel Garcia. I just don't see them making him available via trade. And even if they do, the Mets have used him, I think, more at second base than short. Some of that's Lindor. But I remember seeing some of the defensive ratings when he was in the minors, and a lot of the conversation was he's probably better suited for second base or the outfield than for shortstop. Honestly, I'm fine with Nick Allen. I wish he hit a lot better, but I do think that Nick Allen's defense is a game-changing kind of defense there. And there's a question in here actually from Wesley. He says, what about shortstop? As great as Nick Allen is defensively, he isn't really providing anything on offense. I think if the rest of the lineup is fixed, you're fine with Nick Allen. It's the same argument they made for Orlando Arcia last year. If the rest of the offense is hitting, you can bet Arcia ninth and nobody really cares. And I think that's kind of where you are with Nick Allen as well. If Michael Harris is hitting 298 and threatening a 2020 season, if Ozzie's giving you 20 plus bombs, if Riley's hitting 37 homers and Olsen's hitting 45 and Acuna's stealing bases and all of that stuff, and the catchers are raking, I don't think you care what Nick Allen does offensively, right? As long as he's hitting his weight, as long as he's hitting 200 or so, I think you're happy. The issue is the offense isn't producing, so Nick Allen looks worse. The fact of the matter is, we saw this in the draft this week, I'm sorry. The hardest thing to find in baseball is a shortstop that can do both things. The absolute we've learned that now. Any shortstop who is decent offensively and can play defense at least an average level or better, when they get to free agency, it's a long contract, it's an expensive contract, and half of them don't age well. Xander Bogaerts looked like a terrible deal almost immediately after signing. Dansby was out of our price range. Trey Turner was out of our price range. Willie Adames was out of our price range. Like, all of these shortstops signed massive deals, and Atlanta was not able to pay for them and did not want to go that long on anybody. And I think the Braves have realized we're going to have to build that guy from within, because we're never going to be competitive enough to win the free agency battle for any of those guys. And even some of the ones that come in that are available aren't even, like, this offseason. Bo Bichette's going to be out there. Bo Bichette's not a good defender at short. He's not. He's probably going to be a second baseman in a couple of years, but he's still going to get $25 million a year because there's no other option behind him that's any decent. I think Orlando Arcia is like the third best shortstop in free agency this year. So, yes, Nick Allen doesn't have a barrel. He's done some stuff. He can run the bases okay, but his defense is so good that, again, when the rest of the team is hitting well, you don't really care. And the problem, as Matt points out, the rest of the offense isn't doing that. And we don't know if they ever will or not. But I think at this point, the cost to upgrade Nick Allen at short is so much higher than the cost to upgrade at second base, or even the cost to upgrade in center or something like that. Again, that is the hardest position to find a two-way player in all of baseball. So I think that's just something where they're just not going to be able to do it, right? Final question here from Kevin. Should the front office acquisition strategy change this year? And I actually think I wrote an article about this. I wrote a newsletter about this when the Jeff Hoffman stuff leaked. I think it may already have. I think Atlanta started to realize that we have to go for quality, because the quantity approach, look at the bullpen, the quantity approach didn't work this year. We have to go for quality. And while I don't ever think they'll sign a $30 million a year free agent, I do absolutely think that they're going to, like, I honestly think that's the reason they reset the CBT, so they could go out and get a frontline starter. I know they were trying to trade for Garrett Crochet multiple times and just couldn't get the deal done because they didn't have the assets in the farm system. I absolutely do think that Atlanta's realized we have to go for quality, maybe over quantity, because we can find 10 NRI relievers to bring to spring training, but how many of them are going to be worth it? Right now, I think the only one is Enyel De Los Santos. That's the only one from spring that's on the roster and pitching well. And even that, he's overperformed some of this stuff. So I do like to think seeing the CBT, seeing all of the free agents, I do like to think they are working on some sort of plan for the offseason to try and go out and get some sort of quality starting pitching free agent. Aaron Nola would have been a bad idea, but at the time it sounded like a good plan, right? You get an above average postseason starter caliber guy. They've made some trades to get those guys like Chris Sale. So I do think it's coming. And hopefully the roster can improve enough where adding that guy and him staying healthy means they can get back into World Series contention. This has been Braves Today for Friday, July 18th. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I really do enjoy these live shows. Tons of fun. I appreciate everybody's questions. If I did not get to your question or you have more, I'm on social media at Crosby Baseball. Shows on X, Braves_today. Do me a favor, if you're listening on audio, leave us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we drop the next episode, we go live, I drop a short, all that kind of stuff. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.